It is no secret if you have been using React for the past 2 years or even trying to learn it that the React documentation is pretty much useless. Useless for the most part because the modern day way of programming React is not reflected at all in the documentation. In around 2019, they sort of put this big push to switch everything from class-based components to functional-based components with hooks, and while that was a great thing and I am a huge hook enjoyer, they did not reflect those changes in the documentation whatsoever. So if you were just someone that wanted to learn React and you didn't really know where to start and you were looking at the documentation, all you would see are these class-based components and examples with class-based components that sort of take you down the wrong path, because nowadays almost nobody is using class-based components. The only people that are people that created their websites before 2019, and they're probably actively trying to switch over to the new functional-based components as we speak. And if you go to the actual tutorial, you can see that it's not the best experience. It's just a bunch of text with things you need to set up, and then finally you get to see some code, and of course it is all outdated code that nobody will really want you to actually code in a production environment, especially if you are creating something from scratch. Now enter this sort of secret site, and I say secret in quotations because they have talked about the site here and there, and if you're paying really close attention and you're someone that reads the React blog post, you'll see that they've mentioned it a couple of times, and it is actually the beta version of the new React documentation that they are working on. They announced it last year, and since then they have been slowly filling out some information, and as of June 2022 they actually have some pretty good examples on the site, and I would consider it good enough now to use it and not have to solely rely on third-party websites to learn React or YouTube videos. So if we go to the actual site, the first thing you can see is that it has a dark mode. That by itself is a huge plus for me. I love sites that have a dark mode. It's a lot easier on the eyes. And as you can see, they do state that it's still a work in progress, and they have their progress sort of sitting over here. So the actual Learn React part of the site is around 95% finished, which is huge because I'm going to go into it in just a second. I think it is so much better than the old documentation, and their API reference is still around 60% finished, and we'll talk about that in just a sec as well. But first, let's go into the Learn React section. First of all, they have a whole installation section over here that you can go through if you do not have React installed. And I like that they separated it from the quick start guide, because a lot of the times when people are getting into something new, they sort of want to wrap their head around the way the code actually works before setting it up on their own environment. And that is why the quick start documentation is probably one of the best documentation I have seen to learn React this far. First of all, they jump straight into it with a simple example just to give you an idea. And note that all the examples are in functional components, which is obviously the modern day to code React. And the other cool thing is if you scroll just a bit down here, you can see that all the examples are interactable. So they sort of give you a brief little overview with some code snippets, and then they combine it all to have a virtual file that you can edit, sort of like an online code IDE similar to Code Sandbox, where you can actually test and move the code around. And I think this is a game changer for the official documentation. When I was learning React, the thing I would do the most is sort of mess with my code and see how it interacted. And if there was an easy way to do that without having to first set up a whole bunch of boilerplate code on my computer, even if it's just running Create React App, it would have been such a huge time saver. And the fact that this is now here is huge. And the actual documentation in terms of how they sort of induct you into React code, starting with just the basic component structure, and then sort of styling, things like hooks, and then also the way you want to structure things and how to think about different components and how to break them down, is such a huge step forward. I would highly recommend this over any third-party site, and maybe even a YouTube video explaining how React works to a newer developer over any of those things, because this documentation is so clear and so concise that it's such a big step in the right direction. Now, in terms of the API, they do have a lot of work to do. For example, UseEffect, one of the most commonly used hooks, still has no actual documentation, and the old documentation isn't extremely helpful either. However, they have been adding things in, so everything you see on the left side that is highlighted means that they have new documentation for it. And man, the new documentation, of course, is so much better. So for example, if you want to use the use context hook, which is a bit harder for someone that's new to React to understand, they have so many different examples of how to use it in different situations. The same thing with the use state hook. You can see that they have so many different examples of how to use it in different situations, which I don't feel like any documentation out out there really does well. So the fact that they're doing this is a huge step in the right direction. And if you are someone that wants to learn more about React, maybe consider subscribing to the channel. I put out a lot of cool React videos, not just tutorials, but also things just about the React ecosystem. So even people who are veterans about React can sort of learn something new as well. And also check out our React Discord channel where you can talk about React, ask questions, sort of get an idea of how jobs work for React. And if you found value, like I said, subscribe, leave a comment if you have any questions, and I'll see you guys in the next video.